In the 17th century, Europe's empires carved up the world. Their rules were simple: conquer, convert, or enslave. But in the heart of Africa, they encountered a ruler who broke every rule. A princess trained in war and statecraft, a diplomat who humbled colonial governors, a warrior queen who fought her enemies for 40 years and won. She built a sanctuary for the hunted, outmaneuvered empires, and became a legend. While kings and conquerors faded, her name echoes through centuries. This is how an African woman became the nightmare of an empire. Born around 1583 in Ndongo, Nzinga Mambandi entered a world of tradition and turbulence. As daughter of the Angola, the king, her destiny seemed limited by her gender. But her father, Ngola Kilua Njikia Samba, saw something extraordinary in her. He defied custom, allowing young Nzinga to sit in on his councils of war and state. She watched everything: the tribute payments, the disputes between nobles, the reports from warriors, while her brother, Mbandi, played nearby, uninterested. Ninga was absorbing the art of power. Her father saw that she had a unique mind. "You see with more than eyes," he told her, pointing to strategic markers on a map of their kingdom. "You see with the mind." From him, she learned the dual arts of leadership: the spear and the word. She trained with her father's guards, learning to use a bow and arrow. But the greatest lesson was understanding the threat that was approaching from the coast. The Portuguese had settled in Luanda decades earlier. At first, they spoke of God and trade, offering textiles, muskets, and wine. Jesuit priests in dark robes followed, promising salvation. Her father negotiated cautiously. He wanted their technology, but not their religion or their interference. Nzinga watched the translators closely, noticing how easily meaning could shift, how words could be weapons. Soon, the Portuguese demands changed. They were no longer just traders, they were slavers, demanding human beings for their colonies in Brazil. When her father resisted their encroachment, they labeled him a rebel. They allied with his enemies, the fierce Mbangala warriors, and began to tear his kingdom apart. Nzinga watched as her father grew older and weary, the kingdom shrinking under constant pressure. Portuguese-backed raiders swept through villages, taking captives, leaving devastation behind. Upon his death, Nzinga's brother, Mbandi, took the throne, but he was insecure, impulsive, and paranoid. He saw Nzinga not as a sister or an ally, but as a threat. He feared her intelligence, her popularity with the people and the army. So, to secure his own fragile power, Mbandi committed an act of unspeakable cruelty. He had Nzinga's young son murdered, trying to eliminate her line and her claim to power forever. Faced with unimaginable grief and a brother who wanted her dead, Nzinga fled into exile with her husband and sister Kembu. But where another would have broken, Nzinga transformed. Her personal loss fueled a fierce, protective love for her entire nation. In exile, she didn't just hide, she prepared. She studied her enemies, particularly the military tactics of the Mbangala, who had once served the Portuguese. She built alliances among nobles who were discontented with her brother's disastrous rule, and she waited for her moment. Meanwhile, Mbandi's reign was a catastrophe. The Portuguese attacks intensified, and Ndongo's territories shrank further. The kingdom was bleeding out. Finally, in desperation, Mbandi sent a messenger to find his exiled sister. The message was clear: the Angola begs for your help. The Portuguese demand a negotiation in Luanda, and only you can face them. This was her crucible. The man who had destroyed her family was now pleading for her to save the kingdom he was losing. Would she let personal vengeance doom her people? Or would she use her enemy's desperation as her weapon? Nzinga looked at her sister, Kambua. A silent understanding passed between them. She stood tall, her posture shifting from that of an exile to a commander. "Prepare my retinue," she ordered. "We go to Luanda." She and her delegation traveled toward the coast, toward the very heart of her enemy's power. As they arrived at the formidable gates of the Portuguese fort, Nzinga looked up, her expression a mask of cold resolve. The great gates creaked open, revealing the audience hall. Inside, the Portuguese governor, João Correia de Souza, sat on an ornate, high-backed chair, the symbol of his authority. and for the ambassador of Ndongo. On the floor, there was only a single velvet cushion. She entered the fortress knowing they would try to humble her. What they didn't know was that Nzinga hadn't come to plead. She had come to command, and she had a plan for that cushion. Imagine walking into the most important negotiation of your life. The stakes. The very survival of your kingdom. Your opponent, a powerful European governor, sits on a lavish chair, literally looking down on you. He offers you a simple cushion on the floor. What do? Well, if you're Queen Nzinga of Ndongo, you don't just accept it. You make a statement. This is exactly what happened in 1622. Nzinga, a brilliant diplomat and warrior princess, traveled to Luanda to negotiate with the Portuguese governor, João Correia de Sousa. The Portuguese had been encroaching on our people's land for decades, fueling the brutal Atlantic slave trade. Nzinga was there to put a stop to it. When offered a cushion on the floor, a clear sign of disrespect, Nzinga didn't flinch. She simply signaled to one of her ladies-in-waiting. Without a word, the woman dropped to her hands and knees, becoming a human chair. Nzinga sat down, now perfectly at eye level with the stunned governor. "I prefer to negotiate as an equal," she declared. This single act set the tone. It told the Portuguese they weren't dealing with just anyone. They were dealing with a queen who would not be underestimated. And she wasn't. The negotiation was a masterclass in diplomacy. Nzinga secured incredible terms in what became the Treaty of 1622. The Portuguese agreed to withdraw their forces from Ndongo's fortresses, officially recognize her kingdom's sovereignty, and even return subjects who had been captured. In return, Nzinga agreed to open trade routes, but she made another, even more surprising move. She agreed to be baptized as a Christian. This wasn't just a simple conversion, it was a brilliant political strategy. Nzinga was christened Ndongo and Sousa, and in a move of pure genius, she asked the governor himself to be her godfather. By doing this, she created a fictive kinship bond. In the cultural context of the time, this was a sacred relationship. The governor was now her spiritual father, obligated to protect and respect her. It was political theater at its finest, a way of binding the Portuguese to their word using their own customs against them. She left Luanda not just with a treaty, but with what she believed was a powerful, personal alliance. But this sense of victory was tragically short-lived. When Nzinga returned home, the reality of the situation crashed down on her. The ink on the treaty was barely dry, but the Portuguese were already violating it. Their slave raids hadn't stopped. In fact, they continued with impunity. The promises made in Luanda were nothing but empty words. The betrayal was swift and absolute. As if that wasn't enough, tragedy struck within her own family. Her brother, the King Mbandi, died under mysterious circumstances. Many suspected he was poisoned, a common tool for political removal. With the king gone and the Portuguese treaty in tatters, Ndongo was on the brink of collapse. In this moment of crisis, Nzinga stepped forward. She knew the kingdom needed a strong Ndongo. She assumed control, and in a ruthless but necessary move to consolidate power, she eliminated her brother's young son, who could have been used as a puppet by rival factions. Nzinga was crowned Queen of Ndongo, but her ascent to the throne was anything but smooth. She faced fierce opposition from within her own kingdom. Some factions, steeped in tradition, refused to accept a woman as their ruler, viewing her as a usurper. And the Portuguese, who had never intended to honor a deal made with a woman anyway, saw their opportunity. They openly refused to recognize her authority. Their betrayal was now complete. They didn't just break the treaty, they denied her very right to rule. The Portuguese declared her the usurping woman and officially declared war on her. They saw a kingdom in turmoil and a queen they thought they could easily crush. They wanted to dismantle Ndongo once and for all and seize control of its resources and people. But they had fundamentally misjudged in. She was not a diplomat who would simply accept defeat. She was a warrior. Faced with betrayal from without and rebellion from within, Nzinga didn't crumble. She rose. She gathered her loyalists, her fiercest warriors, and prepared for the fight of her life, standing before her people. On the precipice of a war that would define her legacy and the fate of her nation, she delivered a chilling promise. If they want war, she declared, they shall have a storm. And for the next 4 decades, that is exactly what she gave them. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of her legend as one of history's greatest resistance leaders. Imagine you're a queen. Your kingdom, your home, everything you've ever known is burning. Smoke chokes the air. The screams of your people echo in your ears. Your enemies, the technologically superior Portuguese and their terrifying, battle-hardened allies, Tembangala, have crushed your army. Your capital is nothing but ash. TEC's defeats. This is the end. For most, this would be the final chapter. But for Nzinga, Mbandi, Queen of Ndongo, this was just the beginning of her legend. This wasn't the story of a queen who lost her crown. It was the story of how she forged a new one from the very fires of her destruction. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of history's most incredible stories of resilience, strategy, and sheer, unbreakable will. We're talking about the woman who stared into the abyss of total annihilation and didn't just survive. She reinvented herself, building an empire from the ashes and becoming a symbol of resistance that echoes through the centuries. This is the story of Nzinga, the Queen of Ashes, and her impossible rise to power. The year is 1626. Queen Nzinga has just ascended to the throne of Ndongo in what is now modern-day Angola. Her reign begins not with celebration, but with invasion. The Portuguese, hungry for control of the slave trade and the region's resources, launch a full-scale war. They aren't alone. They've allied with the Mbangala nomadic bands of ruthless, feared warriors who live for battle. Nzinga's forces, too fierce, are outmatched. The Portuguese have muskets and cannons. The Mbangala have a terrifying reputation and a brutal effectiveness in combat. The battles are bloody and swift. Nzinga's armies are pushed back again and again. The final, devastating blow comes when her capital city is overrun and burned to the ground. Her authority is shattered, her people are scattered, and her kingdom is a smoldering ruin. The Portuguese install a puppet king on her throne and declare her an outlaw. By all accounts, she is finished, a fugitive queen with no army, no capital, and no kingdom. The Portuguese expected her to surrender, to fade into obscurity. They fundamentally misunderstood who they were dealing with. For Nzinga, surrender was not an option. It wasn't even a concept. Instead of admitting defeat, she did something remarkable. She retreated, along with her closest followers and what was left of her court. She fled into the rugged, unforgiving mountains. From there, she made her way to the remote island of Ndongo, a natural fortress in the middle of the Kwanza River. This wasn't a retreat of despair. It was a strategic regrouping. From this sanctuary, Nzinga began to redefine warfare. She couldn't face the Portuguese in open battle, so she wouldn't. Instead, she would bleed them. Nzinga became a master of guerrilla warfare. Her small, mobile bands of loyal warriors would emerge from the wilderness like ghosts. They conducted lightning-fast raids on Portuguese supply lines, ambushed their patrols, and harassed their trade routes. They would strike with devastating precision and then melt back into the jungle before the enemy could even mount a proper response. These attacks were more than just a nuisance. They were crippling. Nzinga made the cost of occupying her land unbearably high. She turned the vast, untamed landscape that the Portuguese saw as an obstacle into her greatest weapon. Every forest, every river, every mountain pass became a potential trap. She was no longer just a queen. She was the architect of a constant, draining, and terrifying resistance. But even as her guerrilla campaign grew more effective, Nzinga knew it wasn't enough. She was fighting a war of attrition she couldn't win forever. She needed an army. She needed a new kind of power. And to head it, she would make one of the most audacious and controversial decisions in military history. She decided to seek an alliance with the very people who had helped destroy her kingdom, Mbangala. This seems insane, right? The Mbangala were not just mercenaries. They were a society built entirely around war, known for their extreme rituals and rumored cannibalism. They were the boogeymen the Portuguese had unleashed upon her people. How could she possibly ally with her bitterest enemies? Because Nzinga was a pragmatist. She saw what others couldn't. The Mbangala weren't loyal to the Portuguese. They were loyal to strength, to victory, and to a leader who could guarantee them a life of constant battle and spoils. Nzinga realized she could be that leader. She approached an Mbangala warband, not as a defeated queen begging for help, but as a potential commander offering them a greater purpose. To lead them, however, she had to become one of them. This was the ultimate transformation. Nzinga embraced the Mbangala way of life. She participated in their rituals, adopted their military customs, and proved herself to be as fearless and as ruthless as any of their own warriors. She cast aside the trappings of royalty and put on the mantle of a warlord. The Mbangala who revered strength above all else. Were Wonobea, they saw in her not a refugee, but a commander of immense courage and strategic genius. They gave her a new title, one that acknowledged her as their leader. Angola Nzinga. In their language, Angola was a title for a king or ruler. She had become a king among warriors, with a fearsome Mbangala now under her command. Nzinga had the army she needed. She was no longer just a guerrilla leader hiding in the mountains. She was the head of a powerful military force, ready to carve out a new destiny. But where could she build this new future? Her old kingdom of Ndongo was occupied. A pawn in the Portuguese game. She needed a new base of operations, a kingdom of her own, one that was defensible and strategically located. Her eyes turned to the east, to the neighboring kingdom of Matamba. Was a fertile land, protected by mountains and rivers, and it had a long history of being ruled by warrior queens. It was the perfect place to build her new power base. In 1631, leading her new Mbangala army, Nzinga marched on The conquest was swift and decisive. She wasn't just taking territory, she was claiming a birthright as a ruler. She established herself as the undisputed queen of Matamba, merging it with her claim to Matamba became the heart of her new state, a fortress kingdom from which she could challenge the Portuguese Empire. But Nzinga's genius wasn't just military. It was also political and social. Once she had secured Matamba, she made a revolutionary declaration. She announced that her new kingdom would be a sanctuary, a free state for all who could reach it. She offered freedom and protection to anyone escaping the brutalities of the Portuguese slave trade. Escaped slaves, deserting soldiers trained by the Portuguese, and refugees from other war-torn regions were welcomed in Matamba. This was an act of incredible strategic brilliance. In one move, she accomplished two critical goals. First, she directly undermined her enemy. Every person who fled to Matamba was one less laborer for the Portuguese plantations, one less body to be sold into the transatlantic slave trade. She was hitting the Portuguese where it hurt most, their profits. Second, she swelled her own ranks. These new arrivals weren't just refugees. They were new soldiers for her army, new farmers for her fields, and new subjects for her kingdom. They brought with them skills, knowledge of Portuguese tactics, and a burning desire for freedom and revenge. Matamba grew rapidly, becoming a thriving, multi-ethnic state, united by a common cause: resistance to foreign domination. By 1635, the transformation was complete. The woman who had watched her kingdom burn less than a decade earlier now stood as the absolute ruler of a powerful, fortified new state. Imagine the scene. Nzinga, now in her early 50s, a veteran of countless battles, stands on the ramparts of her capital Lima. She's no longer dressed in the fine silks of a courtly queen. She wears the regalia of a warrior, hardened leather armor, weapons at her side. Her face is etched with the wisdom of survival and the fire of defiance. She looks out over her kingdom. She sees not just a city, but a symbol. She sees thousands of people who chose freedom over bondage, who flocked to her banner from across the land. She sees an army forged from escaped slaves, hardened mercenaries, and loyal subjects, all united under her command. The Portuguese thought they had defeated her. They had taken her land, burned her city, and declared her an outlaw. But all they had really done was unleash her true power. They had destroyed Queen Nzinga of Ndongo. But in her place rose Angola Nzinga, the warrior queen of Matamba. As she gazes upon her new kingdom, a fortress built on will and defiance, she knows the war is far from over. But the terms have changed. The Portuguese are no longer fighting a desperate fugitive. They are facing a formidable rival, a queen who commands a kingdom and a powerful army. She is no longer reacting to their moves. She is setting the board. As the sun sets over the mountains of Matamba, she allows herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The past is ash, but the future will be forged in fire on her terms. The Queen of Ashes is ready for her next chapter, and the world would never forget her name. Last time, we left her in a precarious position, forced to retreat and regroup. But if you thought that was the end of her story, you've underestimated the Queen of Ndongo and Matamba. This is the story of her masterful alliance, her greatest victories, and her heartbreaking betrayal. So, let's set the scene. It's the mid-1630s. Nzinga has established herself in the kingdom of Matamba, but her homeland of Ndongo is still largely under the control of the Portuguese and their puppet king. For years, she's been fighting a grueling guerrilla war, a constant thorn in the side of the colonizers. She's a master of hit-and-run tactics, of using the terrain to her advantage. But she knows that to truly drive the Portuguese out, she needs more than just cunning and courage. She needs an equalizer. She needs an ally with firepower. And she's been patiently watching the chessboard of global politics, waiting for her moment. That moment arrives in 1641. A new European power sails into the harbor of Luanda, the Portuguese colonial capital. It's the Dutch West India Company. They're rivals of the Portuguese, and they see the wealth of the region, particularly the slave trade, as a prize worth fighting for. In a swift and decisive move, the Dutch capture Luanda, sending the Portuguese scrambling, while the Portuguese governor and his forces retreat inland to their fortress at Msangano. Nzinga sees her golden opportunity. The enemy of her enemy is, for now, her friend. She doesn't hesitate. She immediately sends emissaries to the Dutch, proposing an alliance. This is Nzinga, the master strategist. At her absolute best, she's not just reacting to events. She's shaping them. She understands the complex web of European rivalries and knows exactly how to exploit it for her own people. Liberation. The Dutch, for their part, are thrilled. They have the naval power and the guns, but they don't know the land. They don't have the network of local support that Nzinga commands. An alliance with the warrior queen is a strategic masterstroke for them as well. They agree to her terms. They will provide her armies with modern European firearms and cannons. In return, Nzinga and her forces will wage war on the Portuguese from the interior, squeezing them between two fronts. This alliance marks the beginning of the peak of Nzinga's power. Suddenly, her highly disciplined and motivated soldiers are equipped with the same advanced weaponry as their European foes. The playing field is leveled, and Nzinga is ready to unleash hell. For the next several years, she goes on the offensive, and the results are stunning. With Dutch weapons backing her brilliant military tactics, Nzinga's army becomes an almost unstoppable force. She leads her troops from the front, a warrior queen in her late 50s, inspiring awe and loyalty in her soldiers. They systematically begin to reconquer her ancestral lands. Village by village, territory by territory, she pushes the Portuguese back. She retakes vast swaths of Ndongo, the kingdom that had been stolen from her. She becomes the undisputed dominant power in the entire region. The puppet king the Portuguese had installed is rendered powerless, a leader in name only. The people rally to Nzinga's banner, seeing her as their true queen and liberator. Her campaign is relentless. One of the most significant moments is the siege of Mpungo A. This was a heavily fortified Portuguese outpost, a critical link in their chain of control. Nzinga, demonstrating her grasp of both guerrilla and conventional warfare, lays a prolonged siege to the fortress. Her forces, now armed with Dutch artillery, bombard the walls. Her soldiers cut off supply lines. For months, they squeezed the Portuguese garrison, starving them out, wearing them down. It's a testament to her logistical skill and the discipline of her army. Eventually, the fortress falls. It's a huge strategic and symbolic victory. Imagine the scene. Nzinga, standing before the captured fortress, her army celebrating, the Dutch alliance holding strong. It must have felt like the final victory was within her grasp. For a few glorious years, It seemed that her lifelong dream of a free and unified kingdom was about to become a reality. She had outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outfought the Portuguese Empire. But in the world of colonial politics, alliances are built on self-interest, not loyalty. And Nzinga was about to learn this in the most brutal way possible. By 1648, the political winds in Europe had shifted again. The Dutch and the Portuguese, who had been at war for decades, decided it was time to make peace. Their global conflict was expensive, and they saw more benefit in cooperation than in continued fighting. And so, in Europe, diplomats signed a treaty. Who's like that without any consultation with their most crucial ally in Africa? The Dutch made a separate peace with Portugal. They abandoned Nzinga. Their ships, their guns, their support, all of it vanished. They effectively handed the Portuguese a free pass to focus their entire military might on one single target: Queen Nzinga. This betrayal was a catastrophic blow. Nzinga's forces were suddenly left isolated, facing a resurgent and vengeful Portuguese army, now reinforced and free from its Dutch distractions. The Portuguese wasted no time. They launched a massive counteroffensive, determined to crush Nzinga once and for all. The devastating result was the Battle of Mbumbi. Nzinga, now in her mid-60s, led her army into the field, but this time the odds were stacked against her. The Portuguese, using their fresh reinforcements, overwhelmed her forces. The battle was a disaster. Many of her best soldiers fell. And in the chaos, the Portuguese captured someone invaluable, someone whose loss would wound Nzinga more than any military defeat. They captured her sister, Kambu. Kambu, sometimes known by her baptismal name, Donna Barbara, wasn't just Nzinga's sister. She was her closest confidant, her advisor, and one of her finest generals. She had fought alongside Nzinga for decades. The Portuguese knew exactly who they had captured. In an act of calculated cruelty designed to break Nzinga's spirit, they executed Kambu. The sources say they drowned her in the Kwanza River. The news was shattering. Nzinga had lost her most important ally and her beloved sister in a matter of weeks. She was now in her 60s. She had been fighting for her people's freedom for nearly 30 years. Many leaders would have broken. Many would have surrendered, accepting defeat as inevitable. But Nzinga Mbandi was not like many leaders. She mourned. She grieved deeply for her sister and for the soldiers she had lost. But she did not yield. Her resolve, forged in decades of struggle, was unbreakable. She retreated with her remaining forces into the highlands of Matamba, her well-defended heartland, and from there, she sent a message to the Portuguese and to the world. Surveying her loyal warriors, her spirit undimmed, she declared her intention to continue the fight. "We will fight from the caves," she vowed, "from the forests, for 100 years, if we must. And that's where we'll leave Nzinga for today, an aging queen, betrayed and grieving, but absolutely undefeated. She stands on the precipice, looking out over the highlands of She has lost a battle, but for her, the war for her people's freedom was far from over. Her resilience in the face of such overwhelming tragedy is one of the most powerful stories in all of history. The year is 1648. For over 3 decades, Queen Nzinga and Mbandi has waged a relentless war against the Portuguese Empire. She has outmaneuvered their generals, outsmarted their governors, and outlasted their kings. Now, in her late 60s, an age when most rulers would retreat into the comfort of their courts, Nzinga makes her most audacious move yet. She decides to talk, but this isn't a surrender. It's a strategic pivot. The years of conflict have been brutal. Her lands are scarred, her people are exhausted, and the endless demand for soldiers has taken its toll. The slave trade, the very engine of Portuguese greed, continues to bleed her kingdoms dry. Nzinga, ever the pragmatist, understands a crucial truth. Victory isn't always won on the battlefield. Sometimes, it's secured at the negotiating table. She doesn't crawl back to the Portuguese. Say strides. The woman who arrives to negotiate is not the desperate princess of 30 years prior. Tease is Nzinga, the living legend. Her reputation precedes her. She is the warrior queen who allied with the Dutch, the master strategist who built a new kingdom from scratch, the sanctuary giver who turned escaped slaves into a loyal army. The Portuguese, who once dismissed her, now look upon her with a grudging, undeniable respect. They know she cannot be broken by force. Perhaps, they think, she can be reasoned with. The negotiations drag on for years. This is a chess match of words, promises, and power. Nzinga leverages every advantage she has. She knows the Portuguese are also weary of the costly, unending war. She knows their grip on the region is not as absolute as they pretend. She plays the long game, refusing to be rushed, demanding to be treated not as a subject, but as a sovereign equal. Her goal is simple and monumental: to force the empire to recognize her right to rule, her people's right to exist, and her kingdom's right to its own borders. Finally, in 1657, the breakthrough comes. The Treaty of Luanda is signed, and its terms are a stunning testament to Nzinga's diplomatic genius. Portugal formally, officially, recognizes Nzinga in Bandi as the Queen of Ndongo and Matamba. This isn't just a title, it's an acknowledgement of her legitimacy. The treaty establishes clear boundaries, putting a legal barrier against further Portuguese encroachment. It commits both sides to returning escaped slaves and prisoners of war. Most importantly, it places Nzinga on equal footing with the King of Portugal. She is no longer a rebellious chieftain in their eyes. She is a monarch, her kingdom a recognized state. After a lifetime of war, she has won the peace. And what a peace it is. For the last 6 years of her life, Nzinga reigns not as a warrior, but as an elder stateswoman. At nearly 80 years old, her energy is now focused inward, on healing and rebuilding the nation she fought so hard to protect. The battlefields become farmlands again. The fortresses become centers of trade. She encourages commerce, re-establishing old roots and forging new ones, bringing prosperity back to her people. She also turns her attention to the spiritual heart of her kingdom. Nzinga had converted to Christianity decades earlier, a move many saw as purely political. Now, she embraces it more publicly, but on her own terms. She rebuilds churches, welcomes Capuchin missionaries, and even corresponds with the Pope. But she doesn't erase the old ways. Instead, she masterfully weaves Christian traditions with the foundational Mbundu beliefs of her people. It's a brilliant act of cultural synthesis, creating a unique spiritual identity for Matamba that strengthens unity and national pride, rather than dividing it. It's a way of saying, we can adopt your God, but we will not abandon our soul. Throughout these final years, she cements her succession. Her sister, Kifungi, also known as Lady Barbara, has been by her side through everything: the wars, the diplomacy, the nation-building. Nzinga ensures that Barbara's daughter will inherit the throne, securing a matrilineal line of succession that honors the traditions of their people and keeps power within their family. She is not just ruling for today, she is building for generations. In December of 1663, at the age of 81, Queen Nzinga Mbandi dies peacefully in her bed, surrounded by her court and her family. A life that began in a kingdom on the verge of collapse, that was forged in the fires of war and exile, ends in a recognized, stable, and peaceful nation. Her sister's daughter succeeds her, just as planned, and the kingdom of Matamba, Nzinga's creation, will remain a powerful, independent state for another 2 centuries. But Nzinga's story doesn't end with her death. It transforms. It becomes a myth, a symbol of resistance that echoes across oceans and through time. For the millions of Africans captured and enslaved in the Americas, her name becomes a whispered legend, a beacon of defiance. In the Quilombos of Brazil, the hidden communities of escaped slave stories of the warrior Queen who fought the Portuguese to a standstill, inspire their own struggles for freedom. Her legend fuels revolts and sustains hope in the darkest of places. She is proof that the masters are not invincible. Centuries later, in the 20th century, her image is reborn. As Angola fights its own brutal war for independence against Portuguese colonial rule, the freedom fighters of the MPLA look to the past 4 heroes, and they find she becomes the face of their movement. Her story a powerful piece of anti-colonial propaganda. She is the ultimate symbol of Angolan resistance, a historical precedent for their own fight. Her legacy is no longer just a story, it's a political weapon. And today, in the 21st century, her legend continues to grow. She is celebrated by feminists as a powerful woman who shattered the patriarchal expectations of her time. Ruling in a world of men, she is studied by historians as a master of statecraft and guerrilla warfare. She is revered by activists worldwide as a paramount icon of anti-colonial struggle. From a 17th century African queen, she has become a global symbol of unbroken defiance. In the heart of Luanda, the very city founded by her enemies, stands a modern, magnificent statue of Queen Nzinga. Cast in bronze as she looks out over the capital of the nation she dreamed of. Her gaze is eternal, unyielding, and defiant. She fought the empire not just with spears, but with intellect. She defended her people, not just with armies, but with sanctuary. She proved that resistance is not a moment, but a lifetime, and that a queen without a throne can still build a kingdom that never falls in the hearts of her people. Thanks for watching. If you were inspired by the incredible life of Queen Nzinga, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories of history's most fascinating figures. See you next time.